Hello, and welcome back to the Beer and Pretzel podcast. My name's Austen, and in this new series of interviews, I'll be doing a new podcast interview series with RPG creators called Mork on Mork. I've been writing over the last couple months a Mork Borg hack called Tataras, Monsters, and Mazes, an ancient Greek style Mork Borg hack that I'm very excited about, and I'm hoping that it might come out towards the end of this year. In this new series, I'm going to be sitting down with different awesome Morkborg creators that have either done stuff within just the main Morkborg system, adding their own spins on it, or ones who made their own complete hacks of it. Today, I'm going to be talking with Karl Druid, who's done a whole bunch for the game of Morkborg in terms of design coding for it and writing a bunch of really cool classes and adventures for it, but also stepping out and doing Frontier Scum, which is what we're going to be mostly talking about today, which is an awesome acid Western role-playing game using the Mork Borg system, or at least most of it. Karl, first of all, thanks for coming on talking Frontier Scum with me.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, so I have a bunch of cool stuff I want to talk to you about today because just reading through Frontier Scum is just you can see all the creative energy that's been put into it. It's a very awesomely written game, but stylized like a lot of Morkborg stuff. I just love the design work as well. Kind of like leafing through it, it kind of feels like going through like a Western general store catalog, which of course I'm sure was the main inspiration for it. And I just love the style of Western RPGs, but especially with this because it's themed to very much look like you're kind of flipping through an old catalog. So first of all, what brought you into the life of Mork Borg and RPGs? How did you get started in it, and kind of what dragged you into this world?
Oh well, RPGs in general, I think it was when I started. I'd done a year abroad in China, and then I got back to Sweden, and I did jumped into a new major, and somehow I found out about Dungeons and Dragons, and then I just decided that would be a great way to meet some new people in the class. So. I basically sent out a Facebook message asking anyone interested, and I think in the span of a week or two, I had a group of 7 or 8 people playing Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition with me, and then I ran that for a couple of years, and then I found the free league games like Mutant Year Zero and stuff like that, and then Forbidden Lands, and that was kind of my first step into OSR stuff. Um, and of course, once you're in, it's hard to miss Merc Boy stuff. It stuck out a lot on Facebook as well as on Reddit. I remember initially in the Swedish circles, but then quickly abroad as well. So I was kind of just along for the ride at first, and then I started to uh, mock up this Scumber thing, and I showed it to Johan and Pelle, and they were keen to get it to make it official. So yeah, right from the start, basically, I somehow got involved, and then it just downhill from there.
That's kind of interesting. So you said that you started first with kind of Dungeons and Dragons, sound like fifth edition, and then you kind of moved over
Yeah.
into this world. So when you started getting into like the games from Sweden, the Free League games, which are so awesome, and also of course Morkborg, which then you started doing stuff for that. What drew you though to Mork Borg to start writing for it? Because doing a little research on you, I wasn't able to find like example for like a free league or something. But it seems like you were drawn right into writing and creating for Mork Borg. So what brought you to that?
Yeah, I had done some like homebrew stuff ever since I got into role playing games, but I never really published anything. Um, Mostly because I thought all the stuff I did didn't look very good. But then uh, the Merkborg guys launched this Merkborg cult thing, where you could submit your custom content, and they would design it and make it look good. And then suddenly I found myself full of inspiration for stuff to write. So it was a very very eventful couple of months where just basically everything I've written for Merc Borg I probably wrote in the first 6 months of getting involved.
Oh,
And then over time it's just kind of some of it made it into the Merc Borg cult and some of it I released on my own. But I think the encouragement and sort of like the Johan and Pelle just they were encouraging to create your own stuff, and I think that shows in the design of Merkborg as well that there's so many uh, blank spaces where you can sort of fill in the blanks yourself, and just that whole atmosphere and the community from the get-go was all about just making your own stuff. So was a super inspirational dive into OSR basically from the start.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's with Morkborg. That is, I think it kind of came out at the perfect time, especially with all this Dungeons and Dragons drama that's going on. Because with Morkborg, what's awesome, kind of like you said, it has a lot of space to kind of fill in the blanks for yourself. So it's not like a very hard textbook that you have to follow at all. It very much engages you creatively with either writing for it or doing your own stylization with it with the art, which is kind of very much what it's famous for. And that's why with your game, with Frontier Scum, you're able to do a lot of stuff creatively because there's a lot of creative freedom to the game. Speaking of Mork Borg and created within it, to you, what makes a Mork Borg game in terms of its themes? Because there are so many different genres and hacks of Mork Borg. There's spacefaring adventure ones with like Vast Grim, cyberpunk, pirate Borg, and acid westerns with your game Frontier Scum. So outside of like dice mechanics, what do you consider to be like the main themes of these games that kind of hold them together?
I would say definitely the humor. Like there's a darkness, a grimness in all of the different Borg likes, but there's also, uh, as far as I've seen, always a tinge of humor that makes it stand out compared to other grim dark stuff. There's it's of varying degrees of subtlety, but there's always I mean, just reading through the Merkborg core book the first time, it's just so much fun. Lots of laughs going on, not just uh, not just edgelord stuff, but it was actually funny.
Yeah.
They kind of took it one step too far, making it comical rather than truly uh, depressing.
Yeah. So is that something that you kind of try to do with your work as well? Like, is that what you did with Frontier Scum? Like, did you try to go heavy dark with it, or do you try to hold back on how dark it was? And how much do you feel like your humor was put into the book?
Yeah, I tried to make like I think the contrast is very important. That there is like a sort of dark and gritty world, uh, and then contrasted with the humor, which is why I reached out to Brian Yaksha to do the setting text. So we worked together and ended up with a text that's intentionally not particularly humorous, but rather grim, and then blending that with the advertisements in the lore text. That's basically all humor,
Yeah.
just for fun.
Yeah, that must have been fun to kind of design your own logos and also kind of design like all the advertisements. Because like it's not to the same extent, but sort of like for anyone that's played like the Grand Theft Auto games, those games are very much satires of real world. So like their advertisements are very much like they seem like they had a whole lot of fun like writing those advertisements, but they're very much over the top and goofy. But with this, it must have been fun to kind of design just advertisements for this world that don't exist, but you can kind of make them as serious or humorous as possible, or whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. It was one of the best parts. Just having you had because the layout was already done. You knew exactly the size of it, and there was just coming up with something relating to the text that was also fun. And yeah, it was a great fun. Grand Theft Auto, but also of course Red Dead Redemption was a
Mm.
big inspiration. And then I have this tome of a book, which is I think 700 pages or so, which is a reproduction of the Sears catalog from 1896.
Oh, wow.
So I spent a lot of time leafing through that to get some just inspiration on the layout and design and the wordings. I think there's a lot of funny words that aren't really seen today that were showed up in old timey advertisements.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you was about the research part of it, because with Frontier Scum, it's of course based off a historical time period. Of course, you're doing your own thing with it. There's like demon bats in it and undead and whatever else you kind of want to throw into it. But how much research did you do with it? And was there anything that you kind of had to like change? Like, go, all right, I respect this was a thing that happened in historical times, but I want to do my own twist on it. So yeah, so how much research would you say you did for the game? What things did you just kind
I,
of like make up for it?
as far as like historical research, I would say pretty much zero.
Mm.
I wasn't really interested in doing a historical game. It started out as being like this weird Western version of America, but I quickly realized that that's not really the setting I wanted, and there's a lot of freedom in just coupling away from history. There's that kind of gives you the ability to focus in on the parts that you feel comfortable and that you can relate to yourself. Um, there's a lot of absolute shit times that went on in the old west for many different people, and yeah, we kind of decided to not ignore that, but rather move away from it to create a game about it. It's an anti-capitalist game, I would say, at the core, and that's sort of the main historical um, inspiration, really.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, no, I really like what you did, especially with your front cover. As soon as you open the game for the first time, you have a section that kind of talks about that, like many RPGs are, draw on historical time periods, Dungeons and Dragons with medieval times, of course. This is a game that does not promote any of the racist, sexist, homophobic stuff that comes from that time period. And when I saw that, I thought that was kind of very inspiring for me because I'm writing a game that is set kind of at the dawn of ancient Greece, and there was a lot of messed up stuff in that time period. So seeing that, I thought that was really nice. That when you open the book, you go, oh, okay, great. This is a game that we can have fun in the Western time period, but we're not going to deal with all the horrible stuff from that time period.
yeah, that was like from the get-go. Just I figured since I mean there's like if you look at classical fantasy stuff like Dungeons and Dragons, they're all based on medieval stuff, but they're far from historical, and there's a lot of terrible stuff that went on in medieval times that aren't necessarily covered by Dungeons and Dragons. But then when I looked at other Western role-playing games, they all sort of took a very historical approach, the Wild West setting, um, and that's sort of what I found that I didn't want when I designed Frontier Scum, to rather make it a fantasy version of the Wild West, inspired but not in any way historical.
Yeah. And like on the cover, you describe it as an acid western. So right then you kind of know you're getting something completely different. You're not going for total historical accuracy, which is cool. But what do you consider to be acid westerns? Because I really love like spaghetti westerns, but I don't think they have a crossover. Is acid westerns kind of like an El Topo or Deadwood style movie, or what do you consider the acid western genre?
Yeah, for me, the ultimate acid western is Dead Man. with Johnny Depp, Jim Jarmusch movie from I
Yes.
think '95, was a big inspiration uh, that I actually found out about while writing Frontier Scum, and then I watched it and I was like, this is just Frontier Scum the movie. So after that, I decided to yeah, openly um, declare that this is inspired by a dead man. And I think what sets like the acid western apart in my mind compared to something like a weird western is that in a weird western the supernatural stuff and the fantastical stuff is all commonplace. Like it's expected in the setting that there would be supernatural stuff going on, while in the acid western, it's at its surface a very mundane world, where the expectation is for things to be mundane and not fantastical. But then at the same time, as you kind of get deeper and deeper into the story, deeper and deeper into the gameplay, things just escalate, uh, becoming more and more strange and fantastical as you play, and then you kind of uh, again with the contrast. I think that's really important, like the contrast between what's mundane and what's fantastical, which is why I decided to name it an acid western rather than a weird western.
Sure. Yeah, no. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I really like that description of what an acid western is because I had like an idea of what it was kind of like. Yeah, Dead Man, great movie. That totally makes sense within that genre. But that's a good explanation for it. So talking about genre and style with Morkborg, do you think there is maybe a genre or stylization for Morkborg that it does not work for? For example, besides writing Tataras, which is what I'm working on currently, I just kind of had the idea recently as I was replaying LA Noir. I was like, how about if there was something that was like Noir Borg, which would be about like solving mysteries in a 50s style detective type game. But as Morkborg isn't really built for that necessarily in terms of like, doing a lot of investigation work, maybe that wouldn't work. Or maybe it just depends on the writer and how they change it. So what do you consider, in your opinion, is there stuff that does not work for Mork Borg?
I think because the mechanical part of Mork Borg is uh, so simple and adaptable. From a mechanic standpoint, anything goes. But then I think for it to feel Mörk Borgy, you definitely need that sort of mix between dark themes and comedy. And yeah, I think most genres do really well. If you have those things in mind. While I was writing Frontier Scum, I came up with all sorts of different other stuff that are just kind of slot right in, like Pirate Scum, of course, Space Pirate Scum, and then my personal favorite, which is sort of similar to an LA Noir thing, but it's more of a mafia thing, really, which is called Maid Scum, which is all about mafia adventures
That's cool.
in a sort of 20s inspired world.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Do you think at some point you'll ever kind of develop that more, or do you think that's just kind of going to stay in the back of your head for a while?
I mean, of course, I hope that someone else does all the work and develops them. If nobody does, then maybe one day
Yeah,
when the time is right. But right now, I'm trying to focus on just doing Frontier Scum stuff. Um,
of course.
it's there's so much left to do.
Yes, I definitely want to see more from Frontier Scum. Just everything from it, I love. So definitely, the more that you could put out, definitely I would love to pick up at some point. So definitely keep on creating for Frontier Scum. So going back into Frontier Scum, kind of like you were saying, there's a lot of stuff or a decent amount of stuff that you changed in it. So it's like the game is, you kind of describe it as a game that is inspired by Morkborg, but it's not necessarily like a Mork Borg game. It's there's more changes in it than like say like Pirate Borg, which follows the Mork Borg system much more closely. What was your journey with creating Frontier Scum in terms of design and its mechanics? Was there like points where you were using like more of the Morkborg system, or maybe like those points you were using like even less, like it was almost maybe like its own system? So, can you talk about like your journey with creating this game in terms of deciding how you want to use the mechanics?
Yeah, it kind of started out with just the question, what if Merkborg was a Western? And that's sort of where the base premise. And when I first put down the rules, that was basically it. It was Merkborg with guns. But then as time went on, we did a lot of play testing internally, and it's sort of like with every change that happened, it strayed further and further away from Mörkborg, especially from the player side of you. It's quite a different experience, I think, with how it works, with the character creation and combat with the guns and the aces, etc., etc. So eventually, it just made sense to sort of stop calling it a Merkborg hack and calling it its own thing instead. Um, and some things are still were very clearly Merkborg inspired. Like, I mean, basically the whole game master side of things is identical, which was very much on purpose to leave that as close to Merkborg as possible, so that you could run Merkborg adventures basically as is. And yeah, I think that was the right decision to do.
Yeah.
The just sort of coupling free from the system, from the player side of view, because um, yeah, I started to feel like if I still kept calling it a Merc bar hack and people started playing this, they'd be all like, "Where's where's the Merc bar, man?
Yeah.
There's nothing, there's nothing left." Which, from a player perspective, is pretty much true.
So, what so in talking about Frontier Scum and kind of like what's coming next, do you have plans that you could share about what you're hoping to make, or maybe what you're currently designing for Frontier Scum? Because you have a couple supplements right now out for it, but I didn't know if you had more things down the pipeline that you're working on.
Yeah, nothing that I can speak concretely about just yet, but I'm trying to focus on adventures, exploring the Lost Frontier as a setting, and just uh, bringing in different perspectives. There's so many interesting places that I wanna explore more. Uh, so for the time being, keep a lookout for adventures.
Ooh, very good. Yeah, because I was hoping to see more adventures because like you can do so much with this setting that you created and the kind of world building that went into it. So I was very excited to see the adventure at the back of the book, which is an awesome adventure. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what other adventures that you guys will be publishing in the future. So definitely looking forward to that. So for my final question, Carl, this kind of a question I like to ask everyone that is an RPG creator or writer. What for inspiring writers and creators out there that want to get out there and start writing like their first official book or small supplement, a zine or whatever, what is a tip or trick that you would give them in terms of kind of getting out there and putting your work out there?
I'll probably say something pretty controversial, which is to try writing directly into layout. Most people tell you to absolutely not do that, and it's terrible for the editors and proofreaders. So if you have any friends that are editor proofreaders, you probably shouldn't do it. But um, I've tried many times to kind of get into writing stuff into just a Google Doc, and I find it comes so much easier if I kind of lay out the page and then just fill in the blanks and the tables and the mocked up paragraphs with text as I go. So I would suggest trying that out and seeing if it works for you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So kind of trying something else by kind of forcing your write-in within certain blocks. So by designing the page out and knowing where what table or what small paragraph might go, you're saying it might help with terms of like kind of fitting everything within the area you want, so you don't like overwrite, is kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you just have a blank page, for me, I think I see it as a bit of a puzzle, designing and writing role-playing stuff. So if I have like the layout done, it's sort of like putting in the corners of the jigsaw, and then I can kind of see where things fit, and I can like I have to keep to a certain amount of words to not break the line and stuff like that.
Yeah. You know, that makes sense. Sometimes with writing, it's better to put restrictions on yourself, because otherwise there could be a billion ideas in your head, but how do you kind of dial it down to just like a few concrete ideas? But by restricting yourself, by kind of forcing to work within a smaller box, it kind of like narrows down your creativity and allows you kind of stylize that more. So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, Karl, thanks very much to talk to me about Frontier Scum and created within the Mork Borg world. Where can people find you, be it on Twitter or where the rest of your books and maybe Frontier Scum are?
Yeah, I go by Make Data Not Lore on most platforms. Itch and Twitter is probably where I'm most active.
Awesome, yeah, and for that, I'm also going to be putting in the description of our podcast description below. If anyone's interested in picking up Frontier Scum, I'll be putting a link there as well, and also to Karl's Twitter page as well. So if people want to check those out, check out the podcast description down below. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Karl, very much for talking to me about Frontier Scum. It was nice talking to you about this.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And for our audience, thank you very much for listening. And tune in next time when we'll be playing Frontier Scum as an actual play with the rest of the Beer and Pretzel podcast crew, Travis, Brad, Becky, and myself. And also stay tuned for the next conversation I have in another Mork on Mork interview in the future. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and have a good one.
We'll be right back.